Hey there, and welcome back to Q&A Wednesdays. This one's probably not going to be released on a Wednesday though, but we made it mostly just to celebrate our 2,500 subscribers. So thank you all so much for joining us, for subscribing, for liking, for commenting on all those videos. Keep up the good work because it really helps with the algorithm and all. So let's get into it. Now, I've been off of YouTube for quite a while already. We promised that we would do these weekly videos, but honestly, we just couldn't keep up with all of the recordings that happened, all of the mastering sessions. It's just gotten extremely busy around the studio and the label. And as much as I love doing these videos, the actual production work always comes first though. Also, another reason why I missed out on making these YouTube videos for a while is something that I'll get into at a later point. It's got to do with something that one of you have asked for. So I figure I'll just put that in the answer back then. So let's get started. We've asked you on Facebook, Instagram, through our newsletter and everything to ask us any questions you might have, and boy have you responded. So there are so many questions, so I probably can't get into them all, but I hope to answer some of the questions that have been asked the most, or just the questions that I found particularly interesting to answer. There we go. Martin on Instagram writes, I only buy downloads. I'm not interested in streaming. So what's TRPTK's approach to streaming, and will it really make a difference for the classical music industry? Oh, boy, that's a good question. Well, during my studies in audio engineering, I also did a minor in music management. And back then I wrote an article, rebellious me, that seemed to have rustled some feathers here and there. It was quoted in some other blog articles, and the title for it was "The Music Industry is Not Dead, It Just Smells Funny." And basically it was all about how streaming and iTunes back then, Spotify that just came up, really did change the music industry forever. And I say forever, also understanding that people's listening habits have just changed. Let me start off by saying I myself enjoy music downloads the most. I prefer to just own something. When I pay for it, I've got it, I can play it in whatever way I want. I can put it in my software and can put it on like a hardware streamer. I can do with it whatever I want. But you really can't deny the ease of use and just the vast amount of music that's on streaming, right? I mean, for like €5 a month, you have millions upon millions of albums that you can just like flick through with your finger and discover new music every time you go along. Now, is there still room for downloads then? Are we going towards a future where it's just streaming? Well, maybe, perhaps, I'm not sure. I think most likely is going to take over the entire music industry. So we at TRPTK, we're noticing a couple of different things. One of them is, even though we're selling more and more CDs, that rate of growth is not going as hard as the rest of the label is going. So that to me really tells me that we're going into this era where having music on a physical disc is less important. And also keep in mind, the classical music industry has always been more traditional than, let's say, the pop and the rock industry. In these industries, you really don't see CDs as much anymore. You see some vinyl, but also that bubble is slowly fading away. It's not really popping, and I don't think it will ever. It's just slowly dying away until, it's just for the collectors or for the people who just really enjoy these vinyl discs. And are downloads going the same way? I'm not sure. In all honesty, I think so. But again, I'm not sure. I really don't hope so. Because still, there are not any streaming services that do, for example, 705 kilohertz, what we can offer now. So you don't get to enjoy the full master quality. And I know there's going to be people who say, but on Tidal I can listen to master quality authenticated music. That's not the same. MQA is not the right format if you really like a puristic approach to mastering. That's all I'm going to say about it. I have my stance on MQA. Other people have theirs. But I do understand that more and more people are going to stream music, especially nowadays where you have Qobuz, you have Tidal, and especially Qobuz where you can get actual high resolution streaming going. I think up to 192 kilohertz. That's quite a lot. And if it's mastered well, 190 kilohertz will serve you great in most cases. And another question from Marty at Instagram. Even though the market has plenty of mainstream repertoire recordings, I'd love to experience any such recordings from TRPTK. From Bach to Mozart to Wagner, sonatas, concertos. Will TRPTK invest in more of these mainstream recordings in the near future? Well, thank you for that intriguing question. Of course, I can't look into a crystal ball to see what kind of artists will come to us. That being said, we founded TRPTK in 2014 as a way to create like a fair platform for young artists with honestly just great ideas about music and just great performances as musicians as well. To be able to record and perform what they want to in whatever way that they want to. So obviously you end up doing a lot of contemporary music stuff. You do a lot of avant-garde stuff because most labels don't dare to publish that kind of music because they're afraid it won't sell, or they're afraid that they as a label will be judged somehow. We really don't think about music that way. We like to find artists that we work with. They tell us what kind of repertoire they would like to record, and then we are the ones who will try to find a market for that. We will try to find the people who like to listen to that, and I think we found our market in part. I think at TRPTK we're really slowly beginning to figure out what kind of people listen to our music, and the people who have found us over the past couple of years, they have come to understand TRPTK as a label that gives them interesting new music that they've never heard before. But with all that said, of course, we're still going to record Bach. Actually, in 2 weeks from now, I'm going to record several pieces of Bach, arranged by Kirsten McCall, a flutist. And we're doing a Bach album with another flutist as well, Aisha Wells. About Mozart, we actually have a release of Mozart piano music coming up. And yeah, about more mainstream music, we've actually just released A Winterreise by Franz Schubert with Michael Wilmering, the baritone singer. So we do some, but our focus will remain at contemporary music, avant-garde music, and just sort of really surprising music that hasn't been recorded yet, or has not been recorded as much as Bach or Mozart. Because we just really feel there's already so much Bach out there. What more can you add? You know, how can you still make people be surprised by Bach? And I don't mean that in any negative way to Bach, of course, but there have been thousands of Bach albums in the past. And, for example, not so many Schnittke albums, or not so many Petrus Vasks albums, or, you know, contemporary composer Jan-Peter de Graaf. He's working on more albums, but there are not as many as Bach, for example. So we will probably keep on focusing a bit on contemporary music, but hopefully with just enough Bach and Mozart and Wagner and the more sort of the more famous stuff for you guys to stick on to us. Another repertoire question. Cool Mom on Instagram asks, great Instagram name you got there. Are you going to record more vocal jazz and singer-songwriter music in the future, or is the main focus instrumental? We really don't have that much of a focus per se. So I've gone into that we record more contemporary than Baroque or classical music. We don't ourselves have much of a preference towards instrumental or vocal music. Again, we just sort of trying to find the artists that we like to work with and then have them decide what they want to record with us. That being said, yeah, we have just recorded Curcuma, this ensemble by Irene Sorosabal. I'm probably mispronouncing that name. She's a flutist and a vocalist from Spain. And she plays in this amazing jazz ensemble with influences of early music as well. And it's just this I can't describe it. You just have to listen to it. It's called Kurkuma. It might even be out by the time we post this video. So just go have a look on the Triptych website. I'll post a link in the description down below. And we hope you enjoy. And then next month, I'm going to record with Jonathan Alvarado, an Argentinian singer and guitarist. And with him, we're going to record some songs from Argentina, from let's say the earliest days of the tango and before that. And Jonathan, he just has the most amazing, I would say divine voice ever. So I'm really looking forward to record with him as well. He has this sort of sweetness and gentleness in his voice that you rarely see with male singers. So I'm really stoked for that. It's probably going to be released later this year or maybe even beginning of next year. So you guys have to stay put for a little while. But I hope you like that recording as well. And just follow us on Instagram or Facebook or YouTube, and we try to post every now and then about what we're doing. If you're not on social media, well, good for you. But you can also subscribe to our newsletter, and I'll put a link down below. We put out an email newsletter every month or so, and we generally put some stories of behind the scenes there as well. So it's just whatever you prefer. The next question was from Bart, actually from inside our own team. Bart is our new label manager. What's on your personal bucket list to record? Another repertoire question. I'm loving it. So most of the questions that we get are actually technical questions, like what kind of microphones do you use, why high resolution, and that kind of stuff. So I'm super excited to be answering repertoire questions, because in the end, it's really all about music, right? Yeah, so we get to record a lot of fantastic music. Let me start off with that, because I don't want to piss off any other current artists that we work with that say, well, I came in with this idea. How was it not on your bucket list? I have a bucket list of artists that I like to work with. I won't go into too much detail there, because some of these artists are artists that we're working on contacting or that we're already in touch with. But I'll tell you some of my bucket list items then. First of all, we just recorded the Winterreise, of course, last December, I think, or at the end of last year, and that has been on my personal bucket list for quite a while already. The Winterreise is such a beautiful song cycle that I really wanted to have recorded in let's say the Triptych way at some point. Then we got in touch with Michael Wilmering, and he was like, well, what do you like to do? And I said, how about Winterreise? Because I love the song cycle. And he was like, yeah, not too sure about that, because, you're going to be judged to put something as great and as grand and with such a history as the Winterreise on like your first debut album, right? So it took him a little while to decide, and after a while he called me up and he says, let's do it. I'm at the same kind of age as Franz Schubert was when he wrote the piece, and I feel really deeply connected to the cycle. So let's just do it and screw whatever kind of negative comments can come out of that. And weirdly enough, it's getting a lot of really great reviews. So apparently people do really like it. Next off, so one thing I've been dreaming of for such a long while already is to record Elgar's cello concerto with Maya Friedman, my wife, of course, and the cellist on the label. It's just such a beautiful piece that I really deserves being recorded well, and Maya's sound just carries so much emotion with it that I really think will give such an extra identity to the Elgar cello concerto. Of course, there's Sol Gabetta's recording. That's just astounding. Her playing is magnificent. But I think that Maya could add something to this as well. And also just, it being a personal favorite of mine, I would just like to hear it being performed by Maya. Also, I just want to record some more choral stuff, especially early music. There's not a lot of that going around, especially not the sort of less famous stuff. But for example, there's some really amazing mass by Cristobal de Morales, I think. It was a mass written for 7 voices way back in like the earlier periods of polyphony. And it's astounding. Ever since I heard that, I want to record it. It's just difficult to find an ensemble. So if you are a singer in an ensemble and you think you can manage this kind of, scale of a piece, let's say, get in touch with us. All right, on to the next one. On the other side of the musical spectrum, there's Schnittke's first Concerto Grosso. Actually, all of them, but I love the first one especially. It's written for 2 solo violins, string chamber orchestra, a harpsichord, and a prepared piano. Out of all instruments, it's such a stunning piece. There's one recording, if I'm not mistaken, that I found at some point. But it's not performed that often, and I would love to see it performed more often, and of course I would love to record it. Now lastly, me being a guitarist myself, I would love to hear more electric guitar concertos. There's one by Kenneth Fuchs, a great recording on the Naxos label, and it's fantastic because this electric guitar has so many facets, such a varied sound that you can use, and so many options to explore, especially within the context of an orchestra, that I think it really deserves a good high resolution, sort of high realism recording as well, to really enjoy every of those facets. And I mean, again, there's just such a vast amount of music out there. I'm probably forgetting a number or skipping a few. But these so far are the things that I can recall right now of being on my bucket list. All right, now up for a technical question. Dario B. F. Horn on Instagram asks, what are the differences between the DPA microphones and Sonodore microphones? I saw in one of your photos that you use the Sonodores. That's a great question. We don't use Sonodores, we have used them. And at some point we exchanged them for DPA. So how come we've used them, and how do I know them? Well, before I started Triptych, I worked freelance together or for, however you sort of see it, with Bert van der Wolf. You might know him from The Spirit of Turtle or Turtle Records or Challenge Classics. He does a lot of orchestral recordings, like the bigger recordings. And he uses exclusively Sonodore. So while I was working there, of course, for my own recordings, I could have access to these Sonodore recordings. But also, when I started out with Triptych, I had the chance to purchase a couple of those Sonodore microphones. So I just really started out with those. And what Sonodores are really great for, I love a lot of things about them, and there's a couple of things that I don't really love about them. So what I really like about them is they're extremely realistic microphones. So they will give you this super natural, realistic kind of sound. They don't really distort. They're just fantastic. The other thing is that they're active powered. So that means that they're not phantom powered, so you don't mix power and audio over the same line. It's a whole long story. But that potentially solves some issues that you might have with stuff like interference. Now, what I don't like about them. So the fact that they use their own proprietary system means that you have to buy into their preamps as well. And there are such a great amount of really great microphone preamplifiers that I personally would really like to be able to use rather than being locked down in the Sonodore system. And the second one is really what made us go for a different brand of microphones, is that we ourselves kept having some interference issues. We would go to a concert hall or even for some test recordings here at the studio, and like it would just pick up Wi-Fi devices or Bluetooth stuff or whatever, and it would just give interference on the audio line. And at a point, it became really unreliable because every time we had to go to a new recording hall that we've never been recorded at, we never knew whether we could use the Sonodores there or not. So in a lot of cases, especially in like the last half year of us using them, we had to not only bring Sonodores, but also other microphones as a backup. And at one recording, I think it was with Helena Basilova, the piano player, we brought DPA microphones to them as well, just as a backup for the Sonodores. And on the last day of recording, I just quickly changed them around to just like have a listen. And I found out that I just really, really like this DPA sound. They have the same kind of neutrality and the same kind of realism, natural transparency to them as the Sonodores do, but they solve a lot of the issues. Ever since, we do not have any interference issues at all. But also because they have a little bit of a bigger membrane, they actually have a better signal to noise ratio as well. So for really silent instruments like lutes, for example, or a Celeste that we just recorded with Celia Garcia, a more silent microphone is just always going to be better. That being said, I still really like the sound of Sonodore microphones. I just prefer this sort of tiny, tiny bit of warmth that these DPA microphones add. It's just what I prefer. One man's opinion and another guy's opinion is going to be completely different. All right, back after some espresso. Let's get to, another question from Dario on Instagram. What are your considerations in the acoustics of your studio, and how do you choose a place to record? Okay, so these are actually two questions. Let's start with the first one. I didn't really design the studio myself, so there goes that. So my knowledge on the whole field of studio acoustics, stuff like that, is not as good as the guy who did. Ben van Lelyveld, my business partner, who is also an acoustician, he actually made measurements and simulations and all that kind of stuff. He uses very specific software that has to render on like a crazy fast computer for like a day and a half. It's ridiculous. But he can basically simulate where we can put the loudspeakers, what kind of acoustics elements we have to use, where to put those. So he can probably tell you a little bit more about that. And if you guys are interested, just hit a like on the video or something, or tell us in the comments that you do, because I can just make a video with Ben explaining about the studio acoustics and what goes in there. As sort of like the basic concept, I myself really don't like these kind of mastering studios that are just like bone dry, like no acoustics whatsoever. You go in there, you get this immediate pressure on your ears, and just this sort of sense of not really being able to tell where you really are. This studio was really designed as like a sort of very high-end listening room, right? So it does have a little bit more of a reverb time compared to a super dry mastering studio. But on the other hand, we do get more of an experience what it sounds like in an actual listening room. So is it perfect? No room is. Maybe if we had like millions of euros to spend, perhaps we could have done better. But I think this is pretty much as high-end as can be for most cases. And most of all, it just sort of, when musicians get here, or when some listeners who want like a studio tour or something get here, they just tend to feel at home. It sounds a bit like a living room, but without the nasty, like weird reflections and flutters of a listening room. It does have a tiny speck of reverb time on it. Still completely within the Sabine curve, let's say the sort of ideal curve in terms of reverberance time. But it is slightly longer of a reverb than a completely dry mastering studio. And it just sort of feels better. It feels better to work with. It doesn't tire you out so much because it's not constantly your brain thinking like, what the hell is going on here? What I can say as well is that we use exclusively RTFS acoustics gear. They're a German company, and they're just the best. So you see these black boxes there, they're called the big blocks, aptly named. They're bass traps, so we put them in the corner to sort of minimize standing waves here, because those can get very low and very loud. And then the sort of pillows you see behind me are the Sierras. And what they do is they absorb certain frequencies and they diffuse other frequencies. So they tend to balance out the sound a little bit. And also because they're diffusing, you don't get these like very hard wall reflections from your loudspeakers. So the reflections that we get back are quite diffuse and they don't hinder the direct sound coming from the speakers as much. So that in a nutshell is basically how the studio is designed. Let us know maybe in the comments or elsewhere if you'd like Ben to come on and tell you like go into all of the simulation stuff and what really went into the design of this studio. One cool anecdote though is when Ben joined as a partner and he promised to design the studio for us, he created this sort of 3D model of this new space that we're in that was just completely empty back then. And he made it into this typical studio. You know, you have this like sort of dark atmosphere with loads of like red and old wood and this like vintage like brown cafe kind of thing. And like I really don't care as much how things look, especially like a studio that's just basically, you know, this is my tool. But I said to Ben, no, please not this color, because, you know, Triptych is all about this like transparency and openness, and everything was like dark and red and like very, very old and vintage and a bit, you know, dusty, you know, the picture smelled like grandma's, you know, so I'm really happy with how it turned out. It's pretty much, as you can see, is like white, gray, like very light gray, black, and then blue, of course. It really makes the speakers pop. I don't know if you can really see that as well in the video. If not, just come over, you know, let us know if you ever want like a studio tour, we'll make it happen. But yeah, that's the studio basically. So let's see what else we get there. Oh yeah, of course, Dario's second question. How do we choose a place to record at? That is a good question as well, Dario. Generally, it depends on a couple of different things. One of the main things we choose a recording hall on is just basically what the music demands. Right, so if you have jazz music, like we recorded Kurkuma that I just talked about, this like they have this kind of like really laid back kind of style, and so you want acoustics that are not going to be in the way, right, to make everything sound like boomy and heavy and everything, but you do want this kind of like lush atmosphere. And ECM, the smart label they just put like a shitload of lexicon reverb on it. We try to keep it natural, so we really look for these kind of places that have those kind of acoustics. And so for Kurkuma, we settled on MCO Studio 1. So MCO stands for Muziekgebouw van de Omroep. It's in Hilversum. It's a former radio studio. I think it still gets used for radio, and it's like a very like purposely built studio. It's very silent, and the reverb there is just wow, fantastic. Just for chamber music and jazz is just awesome, really awesome. Another part of it, of course, is, so for example, if you want to record Baroque music, you might want to record that in a space where you would have heard this music in the Baroque ages, right? So in, let's say, a 16th century church or a salon or something. You know, we recorded Winterreise, for example, not in a sort of church from the classical era, but in the kind of acoustics, like in the kind of atmosphere that you would have heard a song cycle like that being performed. And so that really is a very important decision to make, right? Because the musicians have, you know, their own playing style, they have their instruments. this is really my instrument to work with. This is really sort of a way for me and the artist, of course, we were in it together, to really decide how it's going to sound, especially if you record it in a more natural way. So I hope that answers your question, Dario. I tend to go off in tangents after tangents, so I hope this helps you a little bit. Let me see. Akiyama, I hope I'm pronouncing this correctly, on YouTube asks, do you use any outboard mastering hardware during your process? No, we do not. For a very simple reason. We practically do not process our audio at all. So what you hear with most triptych recordings is just coming straight from the microphones, no EQ, no compression, no whatever, and we use very neutral microphones as to sort of not create a sound with the recording, right? We want the sound to come from the musicians and the music instruments that they play in their playing style, the acoustics around you, but not sort of the system itself. We want the system to be transparent. In some very rare cases, we do end up using EQ. For example, we had this session with Rembrandt Frerichs. And in this session, we had to use a multitude of microphones because you want this jazz kind of sound. You want it to sound very intimate, but at the same time, you work with, percussion, string instruments, a piano, double bass, and you still want it to sound balanced. So you do use some spot microphones occasionally. In order for them to mix well, sometimes, and in this case we had to pull a little bit of low frequency buildup that was there on all the microphones, pull it out of the main microphones just ever so slightly, just EQ it out a little bit. That removed a lot of the boominess, especially with the double bass in a room. It gets really big and flobby about, and then you don't really hear the definition in such instruments. So for those kind of things, we work with a plugin called FabFilter Pro Q3. It's a very linear, very sort of transparent sounding EQ. And we put it on linear phase in maximum quality, so it uses a crap ton of CPU power. But it gets the job done in the most transparent and neutral way. So that's the tool I prefer to use that. So why not hardware for mastering? I know a lot of my mastering engineer colleagues use external hardware, like external compressors or limiters or stuff like that. One thing, of course, being just, us not using compression and limiting at all. But also because if you do, and you record digitally, you would still have to go out the DAC and into the ADC. So you're making another round trip through your converters, possibly losing sound quality as well, because as I told before in a video, converters are not perfect. So I think these two reasons themselves really make us just sort of keep working in the box. And I'm happy so far. It might change in the future, but I think so far it's really delivering this triptych kind of sound to it. And this transparency and neutrality that you hopefully come to enjoy in our recordings. So I hope that answered your question, Akiyama. Thank you so much for asking. All right. Lastly, a bit more of a serious one. Aryan, a good friend of mine, wrote me a DM in reply to our Q&A announcement. And he said, did you ever consider quitting triptych or the music industry in general? That's some good espresso. I thought long and hard whether or not to include this question. Because here at TRPTK, even though we work on a very personal level and we're very passionate and engaged, we don't want to go into too much of the personal stuff. In the end, it's all about the music. However, I think what I'm about to talk about is not really discussed that often, and I think it should be. It's really a matter of physical and mental health, not just while running a company, but also especially running a company where you're super passionate about what you do. So let's get into it. Yes, at two stages in my life have I considered quitting Triptych. The first one I'll not really go into any details about for various reasons. What's in the past is in the past. Suffice it to say, I was given the choice to either quit or to keep on fighting for what I believe in terms of, what Triptych stands for, to create this sort of fair platform for young artists to freely express themselves. And that concept at some point was threatened, and I had to make that decision. And it was a tough one, because I knew that sort of fighting through meant that it would take all my resources in terms of time and energy and money and health and everything to do this. But it was a quick and simple decision. Yes, I did want to go through with Triptych. And before we get into the second time I've wondered, let me just be very clear. I love what I do, and I'm so proud to be working with the people that I do work with. And this work has given me just tremendous amounts of joy and fun and just everything that you could have hoped for. So back to the second time I've considered quitting. During the pandemic, Triptych as a company grew very quickly. Of course, you get all these artists who have their concerts canceled or at least like postponed until a later point, and that later point becomes like 3 years later. And so a lot of musicians turn to recording. Of course, with less budget to go. So we as a company had to improvise. We had to help out artists. We had to find external financiers for some projects as well. But it turned out to really put Triptych in this exponential growth period. And it put us so much in this growth period that we simply couldn't handle the amount of work anymore. And I vastly underestimated the amount of work involved, and I've really overestimated myself and my own capabilities in that as well. So, to make a long story short, I just worked 7 days a week, 16 to 18, sometimes even 20 hours a day, all to sort of keep doing this and keep it going and really sort of keep doing what you love. And so it doesn't feel like 18 hours a day, but of course it still costs you the same amount of energy. After these 2.5-ish years of basically non-stop recordings, last December I got home after a particularly fun recording, and I felt a little bit tired, so I told Maya, my wife, I'm just going to lay down on the couch for a bit and I'll come to bed later. And I fell asleep on the couch, which is, for those who know me, it's really rare. I seldomly fall asleep anywhere, let alone on the couch. But I just went to bed, and the next morning I just couldn't get up. Like I wasn't able to move my body and sort of, like physically get on my bike and go to the studio to start unpacking the stuff from the recording and start doing some mastering that I needed to do. So I thought I'll just, sit on the couch for just a little bit more, and I'll feel better in like an hour, maybe drink some coffee, maybe I just need the caffeine, and that was pretty much it. Like that evening, I was still on the couch. Like I've literally haven't moved the entire day. Just feeling super tired. And that evening, I was talking with Maya, who just got back from a concert, and I said, this is not a healthy way to go. You know, you're doing something that you feel so enthusiastic and so passionate about that you forget the time. You keep on thinking, this is so much worth it. Just like one more month of just like this hard work, and then, you know, it'll pay itself off. And you know, after that, we can take it easier, you know, or just like one more project, and then we'll take it easy on, and then, you know, just release some stuff for a little bit. But you keep on shoving that forward, of course. And, you know, the man with the hammer, as they call it, just hit me that December. And it really prompted me to think more seriously about my mental health, but also my physical health. I have some chronic stomach issues that really don't help these situations a lot. So I get nauseated really easily, you know, and those kind of things just amplify when you're stressed out or you're working beyond your capabilities, basically. And I figured that if I want to keep on doing this and not end up dead, probably within a year, I'd have to make some changes to my life. So from December, I really started working on, you know, my physical health again. You know, in December, I weighed, I think, not even 60 kilograms for, you know, which is for a tall Dutch guy is not a lot. You know, I was just feeling sick and tired all the time. And so that's basically what I changed. You know, you generally take just weekend days every now and then. You don't work until super late in the evening. And so that's really helped me out. But during that period, I really began sort of asking myself, is it really worth it? You know, is this worth it to you know, put your health in risk to do this? And not just your physical health, but your mental health as well. And again, yes, it's really worth it. And if that was the only way, I would have probably kept on doing it. But it's not the only way. And that's why I'm telling you this story. I hope that people who watch this and are in the same kind of sort of point in their lives where they're putting in so much of their energy and effort in, and sort of they're hitting this place where maybe at some point they just sort of wake up and they can't move, just like I did back then, and it scared the hell out of me. Maybe they watch this video and it makes them think like, hey, you know, I gotta focus more on my mental health. So it's not meant as like a sob story, and I hope you don't take it as much. Your mental health, your physical health is of such great importance to you, not just as a listener, but also as an artist, as an entrepreneur, as somebody who works in an office, as just a person. You really have to do what you love, but do it in a way that makes you able to do this for the rest of your life. So that's it for today. We really hope you liked this video. You found it informative perhaps as well. Let us know down in the comments what you think of it. It's already getting dark outside here, so I'm gonna head home. Thank you for watching.